Hello, my name's Elijah Wells, and today's review is Ari Aster's new movie, Eddington. The movie follows Joaquin Phoenix, who plays Joe in this movie, the small town sheriff of Eddington, which is based in New Mexico, as he essentially butts heads with the town's mayor, Ted Garcia, who's played by Pedro Pascal, over these numerous COVID policies, particularly about wearing a mask, particularly when he goes to a grocery shop. So, after some more headbutting with him, he decided to run for mayor, and that's when all chaos completely consumes the entire town. Not just the entire town or the state of New Mexico, but the entire world, as the world was grappling with COVID and as well as the Black Lives Matter movement. The film's director, Ari Aster, pretty much exploded onto the scene with 2018's Hereditary, considered by a lot of people not just the best debuts of the 2010s, but of course one of the best debuts of all time. Particularly, the movie was such a huge hit in that year that pretty much put the genre, the elevated horror genre or art horror, into pretty much in a new sense of popularity, particularly with A24's backing of the genre. Then kept the memento going with his another horror movie being Midsummer's. Then, after the pandemic, he did release Beau is Afraid, his first collaboration with Joaquin Phoenix, a film unfortunately garnering mixed reviews and some really disappointing box office numbers, being a massive departure from his more pagan horror stuff, being Hereditary and Midsummer's. Now we're at Eddington, which is his first film after Beau is Afraid. Not just a can reception that did result in some walkouts, particularly in the screening I went in. There was a couple sitting like a row behind me, like a couple seats away from me, and they walked out of that movie and never came back. You're pretty much in for a treat from the already a pretty controversial director who didn't say anything controversial, but these films are not necessarily everyone's cup of tea. The movie doesn't necessarily scratch the surface of 2020 being COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement, but it goes even deeper down the rabbit hole than I've even expected. It touches on a lot of things to a point I basically even written notes about this, like lockdown restrictions and the discussion of George Floyd's death, conspiracy theories, radical politics, and cryptocurrencies, and even in the conspiracy theory themed film, which does take quite a bit of a hold of it about this movie, particularly with Emma Stone's character being a conspiracy theorist who just engages with any conspiracy theory she finds online, to the point she either prints it out or pressures Joaquin or Emma Stone's character to essentially read it out loud. And these conspiracy theories follow being QAnon, which claims that Hollywood and the government are essentially human trafficking pedophiles, the vaccines, Bill Gates, George Soros, big government, and China's involvement in COVID, and of course a lot of conspiracies around the Communist Party. Again, the movie, you would normally guess we must take a nice smooth drive in that territory, maybe we can touch on it a little bit or something like that. But no, Ari Aster takes the really long, really bumpy, and really turgid road about it, showing the really ugly side of these conspiracy theories, not necessarily in a way that it destroys other people's lives, and how it's really the case that how people kind of grapple onto these theories and almost become somewhat addicted to these theories, consuming these things almost like it was food or something like that, and of course a lot of doom scrolling. A lot of these are theories as well, and a lot of them are memes, of course. The movie's overall environment is pretty much somewhat the opposite of something like Life of Chuck, which I just seen the same day as well. If Life of Chuck is a more light and breezy look into the end time than this, but for Eddington's take, it's viewed on the end times, as in it's cold and it's really bitter, and of course, where Life of Chuck is a fictional of the end of the universe, this one's about COVID, and we've all been there. And I've got COVID myself a couple of years ago, so here's that for you. Even the characters in this movie are just as colourful as the film's topic matters to begin with. Joaquin Phoenix plays Joe, the town sheriff of the small town of Eddington, New Mexico, and he decides to run for mayor without consulting Louise, who's Emma Stone's character in this movie. Pretty much, whatever he does it purely not out of the safety of others around him as a sheriff, but he does it out of his own intuition and does it out of his own ego. As in, you do see him getting really confrontational with the store owner, and later bumps into Ted in the grocery store for not wearing a mask. Like, I'm not wearing a mask, I'm asthmatic. Like, people getting very agile around that time for not wearing a masks or something like that. Even though I did wear the mask for most of the pandemic when I was like, I don't know, shopping for groceries or going around town or something. Again, it kind of somewhat of a glimpse of us as a society, particularly how pretty much everyone almost looks down at the people that were exempt from wearing masks, like being asthmatic or finds it hard to breathe. So, and of course, later on in that same grocery store scene when he was shuffled out, when the man who was shuffled out for not wearing a mask, the entire store cheers like, "Yay, he's gone!" Like, they just want to get on with their day because he was just being a bit of a nuisance or something like that. Of course, we have Pedro Pascal as Ted Garcia, as the town's mayor, who's running for re-election. As in, he's not exactly like the town's sheriff as a preppy douchebag, but you can't get the vibe off of him. Like, he's not exactly giving Eddington the best interest at heart. Like, there's this massive subplot where he's opening and helping out with the construction of the data center that sits at some point outside of town, and of course, not everyone is super like stoked about it, but he's kind of doing it because of his interest in data science and all that. But also, he is trying to be a bit more mindful about others. Like during an interview, he stops midway just to confront the son for apparently almost attending like a super spreader, and essentially seeing one too many of your friends. Like, remember, 6 friends. If you break that, it's only Brian you're gonna have to see. Like he gets a little bit peed off about it. Like, if you're gonna do that, you're gonna ruin my campaign. Like I feel like he wants to represent Eddington to the point he actually thinks he is Eddington himself. Like, he's a physical manifestation of like the town itself as a person, which is again a little bit of a weird thing when he does essentially break his own rules with COVID restrictions when midway into the movie, where you do see him having a party with everyone with a lot of fundraisers, and their party was like listening to like Katy Perry fireworks. And of course, Joe confronts him by slapping him and getting violently confrontational about him. Like, you said you did a mandate and now you're ignoring it. Like, I feel like you just feel like everyone's anger about it just oozes off. And of course, we have Emma Stone's character as Joe's wife, or Louise Cross, who's basically a mentally and emotionally unstable person who has to put up with Joe's shenanigans. After he announced he's running for mayor, she completely blanks him out, like everything. She is just not happy about it at all. Particularly, she's having to put up with her mother, who's played by Doreen O'Connor, or Dawn, who pretty much is like obsessing and consuming any conspiracy theory that comes aboard. And of course, we have Vernon being portrayed by Austin Butler as a somewhat of a weird spiritual figure who is again embracing any and every conspiracy theory known to man. And this time he embraces QAnon, which is about essentially a fringe movement that believes that Hollywood and government are human trafficking pedophiles. Again, he does bring up a story that he was sexually assaulted by the government aide when he was in Washington, particularly when he was a young kid, which is again a very dark and very harrowing scene to look through, particularly in that same scene where Louise Cross, being portrayed by Emma Stone, did hint that she also had been sexually abused when she was really young, and which does cause a pretty massive commotion when Joe makes some drunken remarks at a campaign speech where accuses Ted of being a paedophile and raping his wife, which is again some really dirty low blows, even for Joe's standards. But it does go to show why everyone's not necessarily out for blood or dirt, but just bringing the worst out of everyone, even even bringing the worst out of themselves and bringing the worst out of anyone that comes in their anyone that comes in their airspace. Even in film's mise-en-scène, the movie does get very interesting about it as well. Particularly, you do see a lot of these little weird little doll things that you do see quite a lot in Joe's and Emma Stone's character in this film, like around their house. I mean, Louise's and Joe's house. And you see a lot of these dolls around. Like, they do represent something in this movie or something that just happened in this movie. Not in a comedic way or satirical way. Like, the movie is somewhat a bit of a haunting way how it uses these dolls as somewhat of a mise-en-scène. And you do see another one in Joe's office, at sheriff's office, on his desk, which is again something I found somewhat eerie, but it does have somewhat of a rhyme to it, something like that. But also, it does get a little bit more meticulous about the movie's ideas as well. Like, yeah, particularly in the Black Lives Matter movie, like, it does mention that, oh, we're in stolen land or something. Like it does make incredible amount of sense. Like, it does talk in great extent about the native population and how the Europeans stole that and all that, which, again, very interesting, as we do see the native character who is a police officer, but essentially the one that helps more towards like the native population, which is again, I'm not sure that's a Hollywood thing or that's something that you do see in states with like a large native population with the police and that. But again, very interesting stuff in my opinion, and particularly how that is brought into the context of the Black Lives Matter movement, which the movie does touch in a great detail, particularly after George Floyd murders in Minnesota. And also the film's cinematography is also really gorgeous as well, particularly in 3 scenes that I like to mention. The opening scene where Joe gets confronted by the police officers for not wearing a mask in his car, which I'm not sure how counterintuitive it was to wear a mask in a car, but here we are. And also, the cinematography does have a really good, or that scene has a really good establishing shot of the town Eddington and how we see a drunk man who I presume has Tourette's or something like that, just jolting along at some cliffside, mountainside, and just looks over a really good townscape, like as an establishing shot, just stumbles onto that. And then we do get that establishing shot again, particularly what was also interesting that he was Joe's driving along and the sign flashes up Eddington, and then the camera pans upwards and you do see the town again as a big establishing shot. And what's interesting about that shot, it does remind me a lot about Mulholland Drive, as in how the movie introduces its logo, surprisingly. It introduces its title, they're like the cars flashing towards a sign, Mulholland Drive, Eddington, and the movie just pans towards the town, or I think in Mulholland Drive's case, it pretty much cuts back to the car or the passengers in the car. I've seen it like a couple of years ago actually. I'm not sure this is like coincidental or Ari Aster took that direct influence or something, or indirect influence. Again, really cool way to pay a nod to the great late David Lynch. And also cinematography in 2 other instances is also really beautiful, where Joe goes on a killing spree. Again, how that is shot is also really good, and reminds me, again, cinematography wise and how it was shot, it reminds me of like No Country for Old Men, particularly when he goes into a house where it's a lot of orange and a lot of like yellows, mostly from the house lights. Again, shows the dusty yellowy setting of essentially being in the middle of a quiet town in the southwest. Again, some really good mise-en-scène with its lighting and how it kind of navigates itself with lighting. And the third one about the film's cinematography, it's also incredible, where Joe gets ambushed by some shooters, snipers, and maybe some terrorists or militias. It doesn't make it too super clear. Where he gets ambushed and finds his co-worker pretty much I'm not sure if it's duct tape or has a mouth like wide open like this, like a board game or something, where you have your mouth like this, and of course it explodes. Like some explosives just go off, and then the almost very poetically, some fires go out, and they all spell some political slogans and all that, and of course there was that one really cool shot of Joaquin Phoenix of Joe just still having Tourette's. I mean, still having tinnitus, as in ringing in his ears, while walking along like a fired up, tarred up desert, which spells some political slogans on it, which is again some really cool shots out of it, which is I found really, which I do applaud to. Eddington does not care whether you're in for the ride or not, as in this ride is going to be really bumpy and going to be on choppy waters at best, as in the movie does not really care what your political beliefs are and what you did in COVID, as in the movie is somewhat of a really abrasive and really dark turn, particularly about COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement, but also how pretty much how everyone got really messed up by this pandemic as well, what we consumed online, particularly with those conspiracy theories whatsoever. What's also really good about this movie is comparing how each of these personalities is pretty much the worst qualities of humanity that were brought out during this pandemic. Like, the movie doesn't glance over that era either with the Black Lives Matter and the COVID thing. Like, it really almost punches you in the stomach about how it goes down in these territories and these rabbit holes at best. Like, the performances, particularly of Emma Stone, Pedro Pascal, Joaquin Phoenix, and as well as the pretty brief performance of Austin Butler in this movie, they're all brilliant. The writing as well is actually really great in this movie. Direction, which is also done by Ari Aster in this movie, is also pretty good at this movie. Like, the movie does not care whether you're in for a ride or not. Like, so much so, again, like I said earlier in my review, like, a couple who was sitting in a row behind me, a couple seats this way, just completely walked out and never returned. As in, the movie really does not care how dark it went, as long as you're pretty much seeing what's happening. Like, you're almost being jarred and somewhat in disbelief of not just what's happening in the character with the characters as it's happening, but you're also jarred and disbelieved of what happened 5 years ago with the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement. So, for Eddington, I'm feeling a 7 out of 10 on this one. So, what do you think of Eddington? Let me know in the comments down below. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Threads, and Blue Sky. This is Large Wells, and bye!